Greetings, travelers. Welcome back to the Fractured and Alterac Valley Wild review. This time we're reviewing the Shaman cards. The meme with Shaman is the old free Shaman with Marabi kind of thing that harkens back to Knights of the Frozen Throne. Fractured and Alterac Valley is another winter-themed set that has a lot of the same themes as Knights of the Frozen Throne, so I guess they really dialed it in. But unlike the freeze cards that came out around that time, these freeze cards are actually really good, or at least they look like they have a lot of potential. Whether or not they work with Marabi or whatever dumb meme card you want to try to jam them with is probably not even like that big of a thing, right? Anyway, let's take a look at the particulars. Starting with Frostbite. Frostbite is 2 mana frost spell, deal 3 damage, honorable kill, your opponent's next spell costs 2 more. So this is Dark Bomb with upside. The fact that this can go face is pretty interesting, makes it a very strong general purpose card. 2 mana deal 3 damage is almost always playable. The honorable kill side of this card, it might be a little overrated. A lot of the decks that are heavy on spells that use spells as combo enablers already have ways to play around things like counterspell. So at best, Frostbite kind of slows those decks down maybe by a turn, probably not even. It also might be difficult to consistently get that effect against some decks, like Ignite Mage for instance has a couple of 3 health minions. If your opponent thinks that you're playing Frostbite, they can play around it by just simply not playing minions. But also, you can kill your opponent with Frostbite, and that's good. Awesome even. I'm going to be a bit conservative with this card though, and we're going to put this one in B tier. Next we have Glacier, 6 mana frost spell, discover an 8 cost minion, summon it and freeze it. If the minion doesn't have charge or rush, that means you can't attack with it next turn. So this can be a very slow card that has some pretty substantial low rolls, but it can also have some pretty sick high rolls. Get a minion with taunt or rush or charge or what have you, it can gain utility very quickly, and there are a lot of high value 8 cost minions too. Because you're discovering it, you get your pick of 1 of 3. So Glacier has potential to be a card that would work well in like Big Shaman, right alongside Eureka. Even though you don't get a lot of control over what you summon, as long as the thing that you summon has some way to immediately recoup value, it'll be worth it. We're going to go ahead and call Glacier B tier. Next up we have Sleepbreaker, and I'm going to review Sleepbreaker with another card that we have here, Wind Chill. A Sleepbreaker is a 2 mana 3/2 elemental, battle cry, add a Wind Chill to your hand. Wind Chill is 1 mana frost spell, freeze a minion, draw a card. So we were talking about like Gift of the Naru and how 1 mana cycling with upside is almost always playable. Wind Chill is definitely playable. Compared to like Glacial Shard, which is 1 mana 2/1 minion that freezes a target. Instead of getting 1/2/1 minion, you draw a card. This can't freeze face, but it does freeze minions. Sleepbreaker is a Bloodfen Raptor that draws that card. It's a 2 mana play that lets you bank that freeze draw, or it's a 3 mana play that is a 3/2 freeze a minion draw card, which all of those are very good. The thing with Sleepbreaker that I think is most interesting though, is Sleepbreaker gives you access to Wind Chill without you necessarily have to play Wind Chill, which is good for Primal Dungeoneer. So it's a little bit of synergy in existing Shaman decks. I think this card's going to be pretty frequently played in Shaman decks that play Primal Dungeoneer. We could actually call this one an A tier card, since I think it's going to see a ton of play. I don't think Wind Chill is going to be as universal as Sleepbreaker, but I do think Wind Chill is a very strong card on its own. We'll call it B tier. Next is Snowfall Guardian, 5 mana 3/3 elemental, battle cry, freeze all other minions, gain +1/+1 for each frozen minion. This has amazing flavor text, by the way. I just unpacked a golden Marabi. Let's go build a free Shaman deck. This says some idiots in my Twitch chat literally every night. Anyway, this is Varden Dawngrasp in Shaman that's more expensive, but is actually just a giant minion. Probably often a 5 mana 6/6, 7/7. Seems very strong, and again, you don't have to play it with frost spells. It's an elemental, goes with Primal Dungeoneer. It might be a little wonky in Shudderwock decks because you end up freezing the Shudderwocks that you summon, but a lot of Shudderwock decks don't really care about attacking with Shudderwock anyway, so I think this card is actually really, really strong. I think this is like a high B tier. Next is Wild Paw Cavern, 4 mana, at the end of your turn summon a 3/4 elemental that freezes last 3 turns. I think this is one of the stronger objective cards. 4 mana is expensive, but you get the 3/4 right off the bat. It wasn't going to attack that turn anyway. The next turn you get another 3/4. Next turn you get another 3/4. Assuming the amount of stats that you get eventually, it's pretty cheap. Of course, because you don't get those stats up front, it's not outright powerful, but the time release aspect of it means that if you're playing against a control deck, it's hard to answer Wild Paw Cavern without taking some amount of damage or you getting the value. It's a pretty strong threat from that context, a little obnoxious to deal with probably. So we'll call this one B tier. Next is Chidi Snowbold, 3 mana 3/4, after an enemy is frozen, deal 3 damage to it. So this combos with Wind Chill and a bunch of the other cards, basically allowing you to lay waste to your opponent's side of the board. Frostbite deals 6 damage. Wind Chill is a 1 mana Frostbolt that cycles. Snowball Fight's actually probably weaker with this card, but I think the card's probably a little redundant, but if you're all in on freeze effects, then giving all of your freeze effects plus 3 damage is probably very strong. I'm going to call this card C tier because I think it's probably just redundant, but it's not bad. Next is Snowball Fight, 3 mana frost spell, deal 1 damage to a minion and freeze it. If it survives, repeat this on another minion. So it's Bouncing Blade plus some new upside, right? Bouncing Blade was never really playable. Snowball Fight is potentially a Frost Nova, and Frost Nova is certainly playable. This card's kind of probably somewhere in the middle. I don't think it's a seamless fit in any existing Shaman deck. If there's a Shaman deck that wants to go all in on frost spells, this might make the cut, but I think Shaman has better options. You have Wind Chill, you have Frost Shock, you have Frostbite, you have so many things that you can do where this card is probably too underwhelming for that. I'm going to call it C tier. The legendary minion for Shaman here is Baron Glacier. 7 mana 6/6 elemental. Battle cry, for each frost spell you've cast this game, summon a 3/4 elemental that freezes. So if you're all in on frost stuff, this is a very big threat for 7 mana. We've seen effects like Deathspeaker Blackthorn, which is the same mana cost for a very similar stat line, be actually pretty reasonably playable in Wild. We've even, like, way back in the day, something like Dragoncaller Alana was reasonably playable in Wild, and that costs 2 mana more. So the card, if you can juice it, is obviously pretty good. Trick is, do we have the critical mass of frost spells yet? With Wind Chill, Frostbite, and Sleepbreaker, you probably have enough gas to be able to get this off consistently. I can see this actually being a thing. Not a good general purpose card, but definitely a B tier card. Finally, we have Brucon of the Elements. 8 mana hero card. Battle cry, call upon the power of 2 elements. So there are 4 elements total. The hero power plays on the elements too. So you get to pick from Earth, Water, Fire, and Lightning, with Earth being summon 2/2/3 elementals with taunt, Water being restore 6 health to all friendly characters, Fire being deal 6 damage to the enemy hero, Lightning being deal 2 damage to all enemy minions. You get to pick 2 of these to trigger immediately when you play Brucon. Then the hero power shifts to one of the unused effects, which is 2 mana, do one of those 4, and then the hero power changes turn after turn, kind of like Dr. Boom Mad Geniuses did. So the card's a lot like the old Kalamos Primal Lord, which was a pretty strong card for the time, or at least like strong enough, like it was playable. Not playable now. Instead of getting one of those effects up front, you get 2, and then you get to access all of them throughout the course of the game. This hero power is probably very strong. Maybe not as strong as Dr. Boom's was, but it's pretty similar. The upfront effect too is very easy to make go your way because there's no randomness to it. In a lot of cases, you're probably picking Lightning plus Earth. If you need healing, you might pick like Earth plus Water. If you need damage, you can kill your opponent with Fire. Just like stuff like that, right? Like the card's very flexible. I think the only concern with it is that at 8 mana is very expensive, very big investment. The kind of upfront value plus the kind of recurring value you get throughout the game makes this a very reasonable control shamanish card. It might even be like playable in Shudderwalk. I think Brucon's probably a tentative B tier, honestly. I'm actually pretty optimistic about it. Even if it doesn't see common play, I think this card's probably going to be a lot of fun to play. Looking at the Shaman set, Shaman had a bunch of above average cards, and Shaman's probably going to be very strong in standard. I hope that doesn't mean that these cards get nerfed because these cards are sweet. We could always use something that's not Warlock or Pirates, getting a little bit of a buff every now and again, you know? Anyway, that's it for Shaman. Next class up is going to be Warlock, so stay tuned for that video. Hope to see you there. Thanks for watching.